Some prisons are hellholes where human rights are entirely suspended, and death seems easier than survival. Here are 10 brutal prisons where the difference between man and animal is negligible. Number 1. Black Dolphin Prison in Russia. The high-security Black Dolphin Prison houses the most dangerous and brutal criminals from across the country. From serial killers, maniacs, cannibals, and pedophiles to terrorists, the inmates' notoriety ensures that no one really cares how they are treated inside. Located on the Kazakhstan border, the prison is one of the oldest in Russia, taking its name from the statue at the front of the building. Can you believe the inmates themselves made the statue? Unsurprisingly, the Black Dolphin is a sign of captivity, which is fitting since no inmate ever leaves the prison alive. The prison is home to almost 700 inmates who killed more than 3,500 people together. That makes a horrific average of 5 murders per inmate. Considering their brutal crimes, it is no wonder every prisoner is imprisoned for life. The security is so foolproof that no inmate has ever managed to escape from the Black Dolphin. Every cell is safeguarded with 3 sets of metal doors, where 2 inmates are forced to share a 5-square-foot cell. Guards make rounds every 15 minutes to ensure everything is in order, and prisoners are detained inside their cells. They have to wake up each morning at 6 a.m., and for the next 16 hours, they aren't allowed to sit on their beds. Despite having nothing to do, the inmates are watched around the clock in addition to light and motion sensors inside the cells to keep track of every movement. There is no cafeteria. Instead, prisoners are given 4 meals a day, nestled inside their cells. If you're wondering about the menu, it consists of just soup and bread. The Black Dolphin doesn't have a prison yard, and if the inmates want to exercise, they can pace back and forth in another cell while their cells are checked for contraband by prison guards. Once inside the Black Dolphin, prisoners are completely shut off from the world, with zero access to TV, books, newspapers, or radio. But here's something completely unique to the Black Dolphin prison. They are blindfolded and forced to walk bent at the waist whenever inmates leave their cells. The guards use this technique to ensure maximum control over the inmate. The blindfold keeps their view always obscured, so they don't have any clue about the prison's layout should they attempt to escape, while the bent posture keeps them off balance, preventing them from running or attacking. But another prison in Russia beats the Black Dolphin in its maltreatment of prisoners. Number 2. Patak Island Prison. Here's a prison surrounded by the freezing waters of White Lake. The Patak Island Prison of Russia is often called the Alcatraz of Russia for hosting the country's most ruthless criminals. The inmates are so unpredictable that the authorities have to continually ensure nothing can be used as a weapon or means of escape. One cell is shared between 2 men who must remain inside for 23 hours every day. The one remaining hour is spent walking inside a cage-like room that is a mockery of a prison yard. More than the hardships of prison life itself, isolation drives most inmates mad. Did you know that most prisoners are only allowed 2 visitors in a year? When a prison psychologist, Svetlana Kiselyova, was asked about the mental health of prisoners inside Alcatraz, she claimed that the place destroys people. The first 9 months or so they spend adapting. After 3 or 4 years, their personalities begin to deteriorate. There is no way anyone can spend 25 years in a place like this without being psychologically destroyed. Unfortunately, the isolation becomes worse when inmates refuse to follow prison rules. They are then locked in a small, dark room for half a month with only a metal bucket and a wooden perch to sit on. What makes this prison worse than the Black Dolphin is its poor sanitation facilities, which is a basic necessity. In the Patak Island Prison, there are no proper toilets or bathrooms. All you have is a steel bucket to do your business. Can you imagine how difficult it must be to survive without proper toilets and sanitation? No wonder the lack of bathrooms is a major reason why half of the inmates have tuberculosis. Inmates who enter the Patak Island Prison have a tough life ahead of them, with no hope of meeting loved ones ever again. Since most convicts inside are sentenced to life, they live and die behind the relentless walls of the prison, surrounded by the frigid waters of the White Lake. One inmate summarized his hopelessness inside Alcatraz, saying, "This is the worst. There are no lavatories, no proper washing facilities, and you spend your whole life in a cell. When I came here, I told my wife to get a divorce. She cried a little, and we've never seen each other since." Another inmate, the infamous Vladimir, simply said, "I've made this room my home. One day it will be my mausoleum." While Patak Island keeps inmates safe from violence, rape, and abuse, which is often part and parcel of less secure prisons, the mental torture they suffer is enough to break even the most hardened criminals. Coming up next is one of the worst prisons in the world that even its guards are too afraid to enter. Number 3. El de Ciudad Barrios in El Salvador. Located in El Salvador, Central America, the Penas Ciudad Barrios is considered among the most violent places in the world. If you're wondering how the prison has earned this dangerous title, you should know that El Salvador experiences more homicides than even Honduras. With an average of 17.5 homicides per day, you can only imagine how many murderers are put behind bars to restore law and order in the region. Considering these shocking statistics, it only makes sense that El Salvador has the most dangerous prison in the world. Believe it or not, the prison's sole purpose was to house Mara Salvatrucha Gang, Mississippi, 13, and separate them from society. Tensions inside the prison are always skyrocketing as full of arms murderers, drug dealers, and members of other gangs are on the lookout for establishing authority through violence. The situation is so intense that even the police don't dare to stay inside the facilities. They only make sure the prisoners cannot escape, but other than that, they do not get involved in other activities. Initially, the Peñas Ciudad Barrios was built to house 800 prisoners, but today there are over 2,500 criminals inside, so you can imagine how the prison being overcrowded jeopardizes inmates' rate of survival. If you so much as accidentally sleep in someone else's spot, you never wake up. Surprisingly, the fear of the inmates is so extreme that they have free rein behind the prison walls. From having a bakery, hospital, workshop, and rehabilitation center, the Penas Ciudad Barrios is a small independent city for gang members. But despite the freedom, most criminals have nothing to do all day. Some spend their time playing sports and games. Others have too much downtime for the most part. Isn't it curious how much is known about the prison, even though its guards refuse to step inside? That's because a London photographer, Adam Hilton, entered the Penas Ciudad Barrios after obtaining authorization from the leaders of MS-13. He was able to talk to the inmates and click their pictures to offer insight into what life inside the Penas Ciudad Barrios looked like. Recalling his time inside the prison, Hilton felt a sensation of total abandonment. He said the place was devoid of any hope, and it was as if the prisoners were left to their own doomed fates. But one thing must be accepted: all prisoners are dangerous criminals, so they know how to watch their backs. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for the next prison on our list that doesn't differentiate between murderers, drug dealers, and regular tourists. Number 4. The Bang Kwang Prison in Bangkok. When you think of Thailand, the picture that pops into your mind is of crazy parties, Thai massages, lush forests, and pristine beaches. But what nobody tells you before booking your ticket is the strict moral codes and regulations everyone must follow in the country. The Bang Kwang is one of the world's deadliest prisons, where over 15,000 foreigners from over 100 countries have ended up behind bars with murderers and psychopaths. Unlike other developed regions, Thailand's prisons haven't changed for decades, and inmates are forced to live in dehumanizing conditions enough to break a person's spirit. Did you know Thai prisons are often described as pure hell than purgatories? And we know that because of the haunting recollections of its prisoners who have somehow managed to escape the hellhole. Thailand follows strict Buddhist principles that many tourists are unaware of. This is why many find themselves at the wrong end of the law, even for minor issues. From reading the wrong book to staying in groups of 5 and even eating a sandwich in public, these trivial offenses can land you behind bars in Thailand. In addition, the country's justice system is questionable, as can be seen in the case of the British man who was attacked by a gang on the streets, and he too ended up behind bars for defending himself. The man suffered several injuries, including a lost eye, but the authorities didn't care. A twisted justice system combined with a prominent language barrier makes it almost impossible for tourists to get out of prison. Imagine you go to a country on vacation and end up inside the overcrowded Bang Kwang prison, where basic amenities such as toilets and clean food are a luxury. Inside the Bang Kwang, prisoners must wear iron chains for the first few months regardless of their crimes, a practice that is frowned upon in most countries. Then there is the maggot-infested food that inmates must eat to stay alive. Although there are prison shops, queues are long, and most prisoners don't have enough money to spend on snacks and additional products. Prisoners inside Bangkwang are forced to live in horrendous conditions with cramped cells, prison brutality, and unbearable food. But it's even worse for female prisoners who must stay inside a cell with more than 200 women. Overcrowding is such a significant issue that they must sleep in tight rows, flanked by other women on all sides. Can you imagine how difficult sleeping must be for Westerners who are much taller than most Thai prisoners? Unfortunately, no one gets special treatment inside Bangkwang prison, least of all foreigners who cannot communicate with other inmates. Coming up next is a prison where convicts are facing an unbelievable problem of cannibalism. Brace yourself for the horrific details of this penitentiary. Number 5. Gitarama Central Prison in Rwanda. While most prisons on our list are packed beyond their capacities, nothing can prepare you for the horrors of Gitarama Central Prison. A building that was designed for 1,300 inmates houses over 8,000 criminals today. The overcrowding in Gitarama is so severe that most inmates must remain standing for most of their days, as sitting space is a luxury. However, if you find a spot to rest, you must be ready to sit with feces and all kinds of filth spread on the floor. Can you believe inmates have to sleep in close quarters on the ground or crouching? But to do so, they must wait for their turn. The prison cells are small in size and devoid of a ceiling. From the reports we've heard, Gitarama doesn't have a sewer system, which means everyone must do their business on the floor and later walk through their waste, battling swarms of mosquitoes and other bugs on a daily basis. Poor sanitation and zero medical facilities have claimed thousands of lives inside Gitarama Central Prison. Disease among inmates is expected, and they are left to either suffer from it or end their misery. For example, if an inmate injures his foot, gangrene would set in. But without medical assistance, the infected foot would either fall off the prisoner's body or they would cut it themselves. This high-security prison is home to robbers, rapists, murderers, and many brutal criminals who face life sentences. Since they have already lost hope of a new life outside prison walls, they resort to violence to acquire respect in jail. But the biggest threat inmates face is the free reign of cannibalism inside the walls of Gitarama Central Prison. There have been unbelievable reports about detainees turning to cannibalism and eating the meat of other inmates due to constant hunger. However, prison authorities refute such claims, but considering how little they care about poor hygiene, sanitation issues, and overcrowding, it's hard to believe anything they say. If you thought Gitarama Central Prison was inhumane, wait until you find out how prisoners are treated in Georgia's prisons. Number 6. Guldani Prison in Georgia. The chilling reputation of Guldani Prison has given many inmates nightmares. Former prisoners have recounted distressing stories of institutionalized torture that was as normal as everyday meals. From beatings to bones being purposefully broken at the hand of guards, the stories are as unbelievable as they are horrific. One prisoner testified, "They were beating me. They were insulting me. During torture, they drowned me in a bucket full of water and threatened me with rape." Here's another harrowing testimony that allows us a glimpse into the severity of prison torture. "They tore off my fingernails, damaged my skill, broke my leg bones, ribs, nose, and teeth. I am 43 years old, but look like an old man. I often fall down while I am walking." Unfortunately, the horrors of Guldani Prison don't end here. A graphic video surfaced a few years ago, which exhibited the true extent of prison wardens' brutality. Part of the video was also broadcasted on the television channel TV9. The footage is so disturbing it may trigger some viewers. In the video, you can see a half-naked inmate weeping and begging for mercy as two guards kicked and slapped him before raping him with a broomstick. The inmate pleaded with the guards to stop recording, saying, "Please don't film this. I will do anything." But his pleas fell on deaf ears. Can you imagine the constant fear every inmate must face behind bars at the Guldani Prison? How can it be permissible to strip away a human's rights and dignity, even if he is a criminal? The leaked video caused an uproar as hundreds took to the streets of the capital, Tbilisi, to protest against dangerous prison conditions. The protest resulted in the resignation of the country's prison minister. Years after the incident, the UN asserted that conditions had drastically changed inside prison walls. The prison population was cut in half, and several questionable punishments and practices were eliminated entirely. However, there's no telling whether it is the absolute truth or a staged facade. Either way, no prisoner wants to land in Gildani prison to give a first-hand account. The next prison on our list is infamous for criminal-turned-tricksters who have transformed their cells into a hub of fraudulent activities. Number 7. Kamiti Prison in Kenya. The Kamiti Prison was built in 1954 by British colonizers to house offenders during a state of emergency declared in October 1952. What was designed as an old-style colonial prison for 1,200 inmates now has more than 3,000 criminals crammed inside the limited space. And believe it or not, there has hardly been any renovation work in Kamiti Prison since its inception. So you can imagine how deathly the gallows must look after thousands of inmates have lived and died behind its bars. Due to severe overcrowding, diseases such as HIV, AIDS, syphilis, and tuberculosis are rampant inside the Kamiti Prison. But the complete disregard of prison authorities for the inmates' health conditions only makes matters worse. Kamiti Prison is the government's favorite dumping ground for seasoned criminals and political rebels, which means continuous unrest and corruption are plaguing the prison system. Although most of the inmates of Kamiti are uneducated and poor, they are smart enough to deceive innocent Kenyan citizens of their money through telephone fraud. The prison has a notorious G-block famous for its brutal lifestyle, predatory sodomy, and mobile phone confidence tricksters. Once a search was carried out in the G-block to confiscate mobile phones, and it resulted in a violent beating by the warders. Interestingly, the assault was captured on video, presented to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, and broadcast on Kenyan TV. However, the footage didn't make any difference for the inmates inside Kamiti Prison, as they continued to thrive in a cesspool of chaos where only the toughest could survive. Coming up next is another prison where inmates always look over their shoulders in fear of sudden torture or even death. Number 8. Mendoza Prison in Argentina. In Pavilion 5 of Mendoza Prison are 90 most dangerous convicts in all of Argentina. Stepping inside is so dangerous that guards often leave meals at predetermined spots around the door to avoid confrontation with the deadly inmates. But the problem is that Mendoza also houses petty criminals, those who have been convicted and others awaiting their trials. Sharing prison with Argentina's most lethal convicts places other inmates at constant risk of torture and death, which prison authorities later term mysterious deaths. While on the one hand, inmates have to watch their backs from other inmates, on the other hand, they have to put up with beatings at the hands of prison guards. This, combined with unrelenting poor living conditions, make life almost unbearable inside Mendoza. Single cells around 4 square meters in size are shared by 5 prisoners. There are no beds. Therefore, inmates are forced to sleep on the floor without mattresses. The prison has a pathetic sewage system that fills prison corridors with several days' worth of garbage and filth. To top it all, there are no toilet systems inside Mendoza Prison, meaning inmates must defecate in plastic bags and urinate in bottles. Could it get any worse than that? Prisoners have no access to medical staff who only show up when an inmate dies in prison. With zero medical records and scarce medicines, most inmates intentionally cut themselves to get medical attention. To protest the severe conditions inside Mendoza, 14 inmates aged 18 and 21 sewed their mouths shut for several years. Unfortunately, their efforts were unsuccessful, as prison guards paid no heed to the stunt they tried to pull off. When a father whose 16-year-old son was arrested for robbery and was awaiting sentencing, he tried to stand up against the mistreatment of the inmates. He reported the guards would spit in his son's food, steal his clothes, and throw the food his family would bring into the courtyard to be eaten by pigeons. And when the father protested against the prison guards, he was ordered to shut up, or he might get his son back in a box. We have seen torture at the hands of prison guards in several instances, but what you're about to see next will blow your mind. Here's a prison where even the prison dogs are trained to attack prisoners. Number 9. Diyarbakir Prison in Turkey. Established in 1980 as an E-type prison by the Ministry of Justice, the Diyarbakir prison was transferred to military administration following the 1980 Turkish coup. Diyarbakir's transformation to a martial law military prison began a hellish nightmare for thousands of Kurds held captive by the fascist military regime. Stories of unbelievably inhumane torture surfaced frequently, earning Diyarbakir title of the worst prison in the world. The military prison exposed its prisoners to severe barbarity, and guards often used terms such as disco and theater to soften grim acts of torture, beatings, and stripping inmates naked. Some reports say that inmates were forced to rape each other, along with threats of sexual violence against family members. It is claimed that guard captain Esat Oktay Yildirim's dog, Joe, a German shepherd, was trained to bite the genitals of inmates after they were stripped. If you think that's terrible, wait until you hear how a new prisoner was welcomed into Diyarbakir. This is what the former mayor of the prison, Mehdi Zana, revealed. When a new prisoner arrived at the prison, Captain Esat met him at the entrance and then turned to a guard and said, "Prepare him a bath, then take him to the dormitory." So almost 20 guards accompanied the prisoner. He received a good welcoming thrashing, and then he was dragged, unconscious, to the bath. A bathtub full of shit in which they left him for a few hours. The mental trauma those prisoners must have faced is beyond anything we can imagine. Many prisoners set themselves on fire inside the prison to protest this vicious treatment. Others died after hunger strikes, suicide, and torture. Many were beaten to death. Unfortunately, prison conditions are still horrible in Turkey after all these years, and what happens behind prison walls is a nightmare very few live to tell. It's time to introduce you to the worst prison to exist on the planet. Number 10. Camp 22 in North Korea. Camp 22 isn't a single penitentiary, but a growing prison camp network, with more than 200,000 prisoners who compare its conditions to Nazi concentration camps. Consistent with the country's policies, very little is known about life inside the prisons. We don't have any pictures to use as references because photographers have never been allowed inside Camp 22. However, the information shared by a few lucky prisoners who escaped this living hell is enough to make your skin crawl. One escapee, Shin Dong-hyuk, was born in one camp and lived there until age 23. He described life inside Camp 22 as unbearable. Starvation is common, as prisoners are usually fed gruel made of cornmeal and cabbage. We are always hungry, and the guards always told us through hunger you will repent. Shin reported that most prisoners suffer from severe malnutrition, as there is no protein or calcium in their diet. Some develop hunchbacks from bending over in the fields, while others lose toes and fingers from frostbite. Due to a lack of proper food, many prisoners resort to eating rats and insects as a source of protein. Can you believe that rodents actually went extinct inside the prison? Brace yourself for another shocking revelation. Every year, 20 to 25% of the prison population dies because of hunger, disease, or torture. Despite this alarming statistic, the prison camps remain overcrowded, and sites are constantly expanding. That's because North Korea comprises 24 million people, and you never know when you might end up in jail. Sometimes the justice system uses guilt by association to lock up entire families just for being related to someone convicted of wrong thought. If the food shortage wasn't dire enough, guards are famous for terrorizing and torturing inmates just for fun. If anyone ever plans or tries to escape, or even has knowledge of an escape, is awarded a public execution that all prisoners stand around to watch. In case someone manages to escape the prison camp, their family is captured and tortured as punishment. The guards, who are relentless in their brutality, don't spare anyone, and women are treated just as horribly as men. These camps have strict rules, including that women cannot get pregnant. If someone is found pregnant, the guards will tie her up, cut and throw the fetus away before executing her. Even children are not exempt from this barbarity. Little girls are offered to guard dogs to train them to be vicious. Suppose a young girl gets killed in the act. It's not considered a crime. Instead, the guards are lauded for training their dogs to be brutal. Despite these atrocities, the international world is silent as North Korea grapples under the relentless dictatorship of Kim Jong-un. That's all for today, folks. Thanks for joining us. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and press the notification bell for more shocking videos from around the world.